Welcome to Transition Talks, Business Exit and Retirement Strategies with Josh Ackerman. Get ready to be immersed in real-life experiences and strategies of business owners who have transitioned their enterprises, whether by selling or handing over the reins to the next generation. Through candid conversations and expert insights, Josh aims to provide practical tips and proven techniques to tackle the complexities of succession planning. Let's embark on your next chapter together.
Hello, and welcome to the Transition Talks podcast with your host, Josh Ackerman. Josh, my friend, good to be with you again. How are you?
Bill, I'm doing great.
So what do we got on the table for today?
So today we've got a friend of mine, David Hulett, and David is an investment banker, and David is one of the people that helps the business owner sell the business. And I brought David in to help kind of talk us through his process and what things that part of the process looks like from his perspective to help a business owner who's thinking about, I think instead of transitioning to the second generation, we're going to look at selling the business, and we'll get some insight from David on that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that because as you've spoken about in prior podcasts, selling your business is a process you need to prepare for. You can't just wander into it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what David has to say.
Exactly. All right. David, thank you very much for coming in this morning. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Josh. It's a pleasure to see you.
Yeah. So you and I met at an organization called Blue Map, which is Bluegrass Mergers and Acquisition Professionals. And I was really interested in having you on because, like I said in the intro, you're one of the people that helps business owners sell the business. And I was looking forward to getting your perspective on what that process looks like from the broker side. So first of all, I guess, how did you get into this part of the business world?
I'll give you the semi-short version, John.
There we go.
Okay. I was, they call them wealth managers, wealth advisors now. When I was one, we called ourselves stockbrokers.
Right. I remember those.
I was doing that for about 24, 25 years. I ran into your dad a lot during those times. And my specialty was meshing the investment planning with the estate planning and the business planning for business owners. So I knew a lot of business owners. And so I, over time, I got to thinking that I really enjoyed the private markets, but rather than the public owned investments, securities, I'm sorry. And so I wanted to get on the private side, whether it was in a private equity fund or whatever. Never really gave this much thought, but I had retired from the being a stockbroker after I think it was a little over 25 years. And I actually took a hiatus and ran an investment that I had at Hilltop Marine down in Lake Cumberland. So for 5.5 years, I ran a marine sales, service, and storage facility. And then along came Pat Powell, my partner and our managing director and principal. And he had just come to town and he had what looks like a franchise to an outsider. It's a contract affiliate for Corporate Finance Associates Worldwide. And he said, I'm going to hang out my shingle in Lexington and I'm looking for a partner. And to make that semi-short story a little shorter, we became partners in 2009 and we opened the physical office in February 2010.
My goodness. So do you like it? You like what you're doing now?
Yeah. Love it. Yeah.
I think that's great. So what is a typical client, if there is such a thing? What's a client look like for you guys?
Well, there might be typical businesses. I'm not sure there's a typical client. Okay.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Different. So we are in what we call the middle market. The middle market is loosely defined as businesses worth between $10 million and $500 million.
Okay.
Being in the Ohio Valley, we're closer to the bottom than the top of that range. So we're in the lower middle market, 10 million to about 200 million in valuation. So
Okay.
that's our typical client, our probably sweet spot, our typical business valuations, probably 25 to 40 million, but with that range of about 10 to 200 million.
And in your experience, when the family decides or the owner decides that they're going to sell the business, have they had a conversation internal to the family about, do we transition this or do we sell it?
Yes, most of them have. And I think it's probably not a conversation. It's probably being an ongoing observation and
Sure.
conversation. Observation being, does Johnny want to, and is he capable, or
Yep.
Anita, is she capable of running this business? And so, yes, they when they talk to us, they pretty much ruled that route for
Yep.
transitioning out of the business out.
Okay. And so you have a question that I absolutely love, because obviously it kind of tees up my world. What's your question for the business owner when they come in to talk to you guys about helping them sell the business?
So we ask people to refer us to business owners that might be thinking about transitioning in 4 or 5 years. And we tell them it's a confidential conversation. We're licensed, securities licensed investment bankers. It has to be confidential. And, we learn about the business, and we're numbers people, but we always try to remember we're dealing with human beings, likely in their the largest financial transaction they'll ever engage in.
Yep.
And if it's a big enough business, it could impact their family for generations. But in the very near term, the critical question is, I was talking to you and you were thinking about selling your business, I'd say, Josh, what are you going to do the day after the business sells? And I would watch your expression. And if you say, I don't know, or I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, I'd be like, you're not a good prospect to sell your business right now. Go home and figure it out. If you have a significant other, figure it out with them, because you're going to need to know. Now, in reality, the day after is going to look just like the day before. You're probably still going to be working that for transition period.
Right. Sure.
But the point is, you really need to know what that next season or chapter of your life is going to look like. Life is full of seasons, right?
Right.
And a lot of entrepreneurs identify with themselves through their business.
Definitely. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think particularly, males in America,
Mm-hmm.
probably more than other countries, and probably more than females, but males in America, definitely, we tie our identity up pretty tightly to what we do.
Right. And if you're one of those people, Josh, and we're talking about selling your business, we're diminishing your identity in your mind.
Definitely.
So
oh yeah.
how's that going to look to you? How's that going to feel? What are you going to tell people when they say, "Who are you?"
Right. Yeah, exactly. Have you ever thought about who you are if you're not the boss?
Yeah.
I have a client that retired from a business that he owned, and we talked about, they came into the office and they were 15 minutes late for a meeting, and apologies and all that. And I said, that's no problem. And he said, for the last 30 years, I walk into my office and my secretary hands me my itinerary for the day, and I know where I'm supposed to go and I know what I'm supposed to do. And he did a great job. He took care of his assistant. She'd been with him for years, but so she was gone. She was off living her own life. And he said, I get up in the morning and I'm in charge of all this stuff. And it turns out I'm not very good at it. And I thought that's pretty good self-awareness right there, right? To be able to say, maybe I'm not the one. So how long does a typical engagement take? And I ask this question because my sense of things is it's probably longer than the prospect realizes when they walk in the door.
It is much longer than most people realize. To do a full-blown process that we do to get the highest price and terms, we tell our prospective clients it's going to be between 6 and 12 months. And odds are it's going to be a lot closer to 12 than 6.
Okay. And do you see people, because I was talking about this with my dad, actually, and we were talking about working with the business transitions, and Dad was saying, you need to be watching for the business owner who wakes up one morning and just says, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And he said there's a percentage of businesses that sell, there's a percentage that transition to the next generation, and there's a percentage where the owner just wakes up and says, I'm not doing this anymore. And the business kind of implodes, right? Or dwindles away because they're not pushing as hard as they used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Josh. One of the things we tell clients or prospective clients is don't retire early.
Yeah.
So the worst thing that can happen is they retain us. We go to market. We're months into it, and their earnings slope has been nice, and we're projecting it to continue to be nice, going up.
Yep.
And it drops. And then the buyers are like, why is it dropping? And when's the drop going to cease?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We
when
call
does it
that-
go back to nice? Yeah.
We call that trying to catch a falling knife. If you're buying a business whose earnings are declining because you don't know where it's going to end. So we harp on that a lot. Please just don't retire early. It makes our job much more difficult, if not impossible. And it'll cost you money.
And there we go. And I think that's one of the points that I think it, as you said, this is probably the largest financial transaction of the owner's life, because we're not really talking about the serial entrepreneur who's built and sold 4 or 5 businesses, or at least I'm not. And so it's one transition, one chance to sell. And if the owner decides to do something in the process, that can really mess up the sale on the other end. But I wonder, and you probably saw this in your time as a financial advisor, that you get a prospect to come into the office, and this kind of surprised me when I started in the business, that there are clients who come in and are still very guarded, and they want to develop trust and they want to get to know you, and that's all understandable and expected. But there are also people who have clearly just been waiting for someone that they can hand this box of paper that's figuratively on fire to and say, here, you fix it, right? Once I found my person, here you go, you take care of this stuff. And so I could see someone coming in to work with you, they've met with you, they've gotten to know your process, and in their mind, they've made the decision, we're going to sell the business. We're not going to transition. I'm not going to work another 5 years. Whatever that conversation was, they've made the decision in their mind. And they come into you and they want to say, okay, I met with David, I'm done. Meanwhile, you're saying, no. We need to have, the next 12 months or 6 months need to look really good, because that's how we're going to do the math to figure out the multiples.
Well, that's true. And there's another side of that.
Okay.
So we tell our prospective clients that if we don't have a match personally, we don't need to have a business match. We can't, because think of the stress that they're under running their business and dealing with us, and we try to mitigate as much of the interruptions as we can by batch processing calls and emails, things like that to them. And they don't talk to the buyers except when we're around on the phone, involved with it, and it's very rare that they have any contact, much contact at all. However, at the first part of the process, they or their designee is getting us a tremendous amount of paperwork for due diligence. Once we sign a letter of intent, and if you ask me about the process, we'll go through that later. We're asking for minutia, so they and or their designees are going to be intimately involved. But you think of this: our typical business owner has owned that business 20 or 30 years.
Sure.
Not only their business, it not only provides for them, their family. Most of the time, it's their baby.
Yeah.
So emotionally, they are handing their baby to someone else. So it's like, how good of a caretaker is this entity going to be? And as they get closer to that liquidity event, they get more nervous. And we tell them that your stress level, whatever it is today, and I don't need to know what that is, it's going to be going up exponentially during this process. And the closer you get to getting that check on closing day, the stress is going to intensify, but also so's the greed.
Very good point. Yeah. And I think I'm impressed that you bring that up, because I feel like that could very easily be the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Is you're going to sell this business for millions of dollars. And even after tax, title, and license and fees and right, and all of the things, you're still going to walk away with more money in the bank than you've ever had.
Generally tens of millions of dollars after tax.
And that's going, and it's, as you said, this is going to change your life. This could change your children's lives. Depending on the deal, it could change your grandchildren's lives. And I think, and this is something I see working with clients, retiring executives or other, or, attorneys, whatever, that part of them is saying, no, I really do want to have more money in my retirement account when I leave. I really do like to travel business class. I really do like to eat out when I go to Chicago or New York. And I feel like we, the advisors, are maybe some of the only people who can say to the client, that's okay. It's okay for you to say, this is what I want to do. That's not wrong to want to do nice things, to want to go interesting places. That's not bad. And you tie that up with a business deal that is going to net them, like you said, tens of millions of dollars. There's got to be some way to get peace, get comfortable with the fact that you are going to do a deal that's going to make you very wealthy in a culture that occasionally is uncomfortable talking about money, right?
Yes.
And uncomfortable with the idea of, David, I'm not happy with this offer. They're going to offer me $18 million and I really want 20. And it's easy for society to kind of look at that and say, oh, right, because 18 isn't enough and you need the extra $2 million, right? And in our position, in our world, I feel like one of our services, one of our values is to help the client have a conversation kind of with themselves about, no, I really do think it's worth the extra 2 million. And that is kind of important.
Well, there's several facets of what you just said. So once we sign a letter of intent, it has the dollar amount there. And so we've gone through an exhaustive process. And several times we've had over 100 entities sign confidentiality agreements. We're at market with one now. We've been at market maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I think we're up to 65 or 66 entities looking at it.
Wow.
So once we've exhausted that process, we believe that the market has spoken. We know what it's worth by the letters of intent that we have in front of us, and we're looking for the best fit. That's one step, okay? But even after that, you're negotiating things like net working capital targets. So how much is going to be left in the business?
Mm-hmm.
You're negotiating baskets, which is amount that they can come back to the seller on if something goes wrong. And so that's where you really get into the minutia, where you can have things that in the scheme of things aren't that big. You know, if you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
say, a $25 million sale, and there's a couple things that are 50 to 100,000 each, it's
Right.
not going to change. But what we find, it's not going to change their lifestyle. But what we find is when the 25 million becomes real,
Yeah.
when they're getting close to the close, then the greed sets. That's when the greed sets in. It's like, well, why did I lose that 100,000? Well, you just got 25 million, and it's the right thing to do, and you
Yeah.
should leave that in there. And that's
Right.
when I say it comes in. I'll tell you a quick story.
Sure.
The guy wasn't being greedy; he was being inquisitive, and it was completely legit. We were selling a business. It was a division of another business that the family owned. And so it's very complex on how you allocate the expenses and so forth. So there's a lot of, even after the LOI was signed, there was a lot of pushing and pulling. Okay. Arm wrestling, we call it. So they were being bought by a private equity group. And the owner had a friend, good dear friend, who was a CPA and who owned a very small part of the business and sat on the board. And he was the point person. So the owner calls me one day and says, Jim, the point person, said, hey, I heard you gave the private equity group $50,000 on this factor, this thing. I said, that's true. He said, that would pay for one of my grandchildren to go to college for a year. I'm like, okay, I guess depending on where they go. Yeah, sure. What's your point? He said, are you supposed to do that without my permission? I'm like, no. He goes, but you did it. I'm like, yes. He's a great guy. Okay. And he said, why did you do that, Dave? I said, look, I'm negotiating with Bob over this private equity group. And Bob, on Monday, I knew that he was sweating bullets because on Tuesday morning, he was going to talk to his investment committee. And I needed to give him something to puff his chest out and say, hey, I got this from him. So I gave him 50 grand. But next week, we're going to take up this subject and I'm going to get him for 200. So I'm just greasing the wheels.
Yeah.
So he said, well, it better happen. And it's kind of like the analogy, the basketball player takes the ill-advised shot. The coach is getting up to yell at him and it goes in. It better go in. It went in or I wouldn't be telling the story. Okay.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, interesting that you say that. If you could, what's the process look like? So I've come in with you. We've had a conversation and I've said, yeah, I think you're the right person to help me sell the baby. What happens after that?
Well, the first thing is very unpleasant. It's a lot of FINRA paperwork. So when we get past that, because we're not interested in talking about that, right?
Right.
So we get past that. We have two tracks. We're starting to gather information from you on the business to write the book. It's a book about your business. It's called a CIM, Confidential Information Memorandum. So we're writing this book, and you're helping us by providing us all the data. We have a site visit. We do it very discreetly, by the way. People don't know the business is for sale until the day after it sells, and you, as the business owner, tell them. Okay.
Okay.
So we're doing that on one hand. On the other hand, we're building a buyer list, a list of private equity groups that may have an interest, a list of strategic investors that may have an interest. And we give that list to you before we contact anyone and you approve them. Okay. So we're going down that path. So the whole process kind of looks like a barbell. On the front end, there's a lot of involvement with you. And then you're like, what's going on? And we're talking to you every week. Once we go to market, we have a certain time. We talk to every client while we're at market during the week. And we usually have other interaction with them, but that's a formal, hey, this is what happened this week. And then the next step is we ask for indications of interest. An indication of interest from a potential buyer is, here's what I think it's worth. It could be a dollar amount. It could be a multiple of adjusted EBITDA. It could be a range of dollars, a range of multiples. It could be about anything. It's very loose. And what you want to do with that, Josh, is you want to focus, you want to eliminate the people who are really out of your ballpark. If you think the business is worth 25 to 30 and they're coming in at 18 to 20 and you have some at 25 to 30, well, you eliminate the low ones and concentrate on the higher ones, obviously. So then we see who, once we get those indications of interest that are in the ballpark, we'll say, and seem to be good fits for what the seller wants. Sometimes it's oftentimes take good care of my employees, keep my business in the same location, the same city, grow it, reward the employees, whatever. So then we start scheduling management meetings where they can talk directly to the seller, get a feel for them, where have you been, where are you, and why are you leaving? And they allow them to do more due diligence. And then we ask for letters of intent, LOIs. So a letter of intent is when we get those, it's very specific. It is a legal document and we sign one of them. So we present them to our client and say, we have 4 letters of intent, for example. Here they are. Here are the pros and cons of each of them. And here's the one we recommend that we push back on the hardest and hopefully sign with. Once you sign a letter of intent, it's exclusive. So an indication of interest is kind of like saying, hey, I want to date you, get to know you. Right, a letter of intent is we're engaged. We're exclusive. Yeah. We're not dating anyone else. And we've got a period here from 60 to 90 days typically where we're going to be engaged and then get to the altar. And that's the close. Mm-hmm. So that's the process in a nutshell.
Very interesting. I'm trying to think of what we should expand on. So from that perspective, the seller, your client, is very involved, or their people are very involved. There we go. So if the owner doesn't want or wants to control who knows what about the sale coming, obviously they need to right. Yeah, I'm sure. If they have to come up with detailed financials or detailed sales numbers, is that something that the owner tries to put together themselves, or do you see them kind of bringing in their top level people to help them put
Typically, they bring in their top level people. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. And what are the things that you have seen that help the business sell for more money or sell faster? What are the factors that kind of influence?
Well, the more money, Josh, is you have to paint a growth story.
Okay.
So, businesses typically sell on multiples of adjusted EBITDA. And let's just say the range of a certain business or industry is 4 to 6 times. Yep. What's the difference between 4 and 6? Well, it's 50% difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So what could get you 6 rather than 4? It's if you can paint a convincing picture that the earnings will continue to grow. That's 1. 2 is if there are synergies between the buyer and the seller. Say there's excess capacity in the seller in their manufacturing facility, and the buyer has a need for excess capacity, and they can lay it off. So maybe you get a bump because of that.
Right. Okay. And have you seen that in talking about value of the business? Part of that would be, what's the management team look like underneath the business owner? How much involvement do they have? How much?
It's very important most of the time.
Okay.
Occasionally, a private equity group, for example, owns a similar business. They're going to transition their own management team over. That's very rare. Most of the time, the buyer wants very solid, deep management. And most of the time, they will reward that management over a period of time if the business is successful, much more so than most business owners do themselves.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
David, I really appreciate your time this morning. This has been great. If you would, tell people if they're interested in talking to you about what you do and how it works, how do they get a hold of you?
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you giving me that opportunity, Josh.
Of course.
We're Corporate Finance Associates of Kentucky. You can find us on the web at cfaw.com/Lexington. You can call us at 859-963-2400. You can email me at dhulett@cfaw.com. That's DHULETT@cfaw.com. How's that?
That's perfect. Nicely done. Nicely done. Tell your partners that you did the plug perfectly.
They won't
taking the
believe
rest
it.
of the day off.
Look, we've shot a couple of videos, and all of us in the office agree I'm the worst.
No, I think you did fantastic. That was great.
Oh no, he
That
did
was
great.
great.
He did great. He even spelled his name.
I'm telling you, that was wonderful.
Well, if I was going to be my usual smart aleck self, I would have said, "Let me spell that for you," and said DAVID.
That's right.
Meanwhile, I'd have gone off the ledge going HEW instead of HEL.
I did it for people like you, Bill.
Thank you.
That's
I
right.
appreciate that, David. I really do. Fascinating conversation. But Josh, before we end this podcast, let's talk about how folks can get a hold of you if they are listening to this podcast and maybe they want to have a conversation with you.
So I am Josh Ackerman. I'm at Context Financial, CONTEXTFinancial.com.
You took that spelling thing really seriously, didn't you?
I took that spelling thing pretty seriously. Yes, I did.
And can they call your office, or how do they go that way?
They can call the office. The number is 859-514-1999. And email is josh@contextfinancial.com.
Super. Thank you, Josh. And for those of you who took the time to listen to this podcast, thank you for listening. Also, I would say if you're not a subscriber to this podcast, maybe you just stumbled across it, do yourself a favor, hit the follow button. That way you become a subscriber, and then every time Josh drops a new episode, you are alerted and you can listen to it. You don't have to wonder when and where you heard it or how you got to it to begin with, okay? Become a subscriber. And I would also ask that if you like what you have heard, share it with other people. Word of mouth promotion is a very welcome tool, and we do appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Josh and everybody at Context Financial, I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen today and remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's your choice, and it's up to you to make it. Until next time.